What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of WNBA Today on CLNS. I'm Noa Dalzell, and we have a very special guest today, Morgan Tuck, General Manager of the Connecticut Sun. For those of you who don't know Morgan, she's a former WNBA player who now serves as the Sun's General Manager. She won 4 national championships at UConn, was the 3rd overall pick at 2016, has been with the Sun organization since 2021. Is that correct? In a front office organizational capacity?
Yep. Yes, for sure. So it's been about a little over 4 years so far.
And you were promoted to general manager last year, and we caught up before then. And I was thinking about this today as I was preparing for this interview. Like, what a whirlwind year, not just for the Sun, but also just for the WNBA at large. You have the expansion draft, you have the draft, you have a almost completely new roster. And I'm curious from your standpoint on a personal level, what was this past year like for you?
I think whirlwind is like the best way to put it. I think it was interesting, right? I think when I think back to like a year ago from now, I think I knew I was getting into something that would be challenging, and it 100% lived up to that. It was very challenging. It was all over the place, good and bad. But I think back in, my short professional career since playing, it definitely was, I think, my most pivotal year, right? I think I learned the most. I think I grew a lot and kind of really had to get out of my comfort zone. So it was quite the year, but it was one that I definitely needed. So I'm appreciative of it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, for someone to take over as a first-time general manager, you could have taken over a team that was pretty much gonna stay the same, and maybe you're just selecting a draft pick, but really, you had to kind of re-envision what this
Mm.
roster was going to look like, and we all know, those of us that have followed the Sun for a long time, we all know,
Yeah.
Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bonner, like, there was an identity for this group, and now you pretty much had to I don't wanna say start from scratch because there was some
Yeah.
carryover, but largely kind of re-envision that. What was your vision for this team as you were beginning the process? And I remember when we were talking, you were like, a lot of things are out of your control. You're gonna have to see what players want and all
Yep.
that. But what was kind of your initial vision and how do you feel about how things came to fruition in year 1 here?
Yeah, I think we knew that we were going to have a good amount of turnover, right? I think we knew that for the last couple years of, we look at a team cycle, right? And I think our cycle at Connecticut Sun was really, really long. And I was here the last time we weren't good when I got drafted in 2016 and we didn't make playoffs and things like that. So we sustained a lot of excellence for a long time, right? Obviously, we didn't get that championship, right? That's like the main thing. So I
Mhm.
think we knew coming in that we're gonna have some. It's gonna have to change, right? We can't just kind of stay status quo and do things the same way and expect a different result. So I think we anticipated a little bit that we were gonna have some of the player wants that we kind of spoke about. That we were gonna have to make some changes. So I think it was first being able to navigate that a little bit, and then understanding. When I looked at the history of Connecticut Sun and how we got really good, and right was that team that was in the semifinals 6 straight years and making finals, they built through the draft and select free agents, right? I think that's something that I came in with understanding that the way that we're going to be able to restart our cycle is we have to get younger. We have to be able to find some really good draft picks to be able to build our team and kind of rebuild a young core. I think that's what I was most proud of from our team in the past was that core, the couple players that you mentioned, Bree Jones, right? We had John Cole Jones for a little bit. That core was really, really good. And besides DB, they were all drafted here. So I think we wanted to carry that a little bit to say like, look, we can find a way to get back to where we were and even above that and further than that, but we have to start over at some point. And so it just so happened to be that year 1 was when we had to do that. So it caused some challenges, but I think, now looking back in hindsight, I think we did a pretty good job with making sure that we're kind of building this young core. And I think at the beginning, it was rough, right? We were like, what are we doing? Is this plan going to work? And I think as we kind of went through the season toward the end, we were like, okay, I think we're on the right path, and it gave us some hope for the future.
For sure, and I feel like it doesn't always show up in the box score or in the record, but it was very clear that the Connecticut Sun post All-Star break felt like a
Yeah.
much better team, and it
Yeah,
did
yeah.
show up a little bit in the ranking. I mean, I think you guys were 8 and 14 after the break, but you're just competing in every game, and it
Yeah.
just felt like things were kind of coming together. You mentioned building through the draft. What stood out to you about players like Saniya Rivers and Aneesah Morrow and kind of what I was at the WNBA draft in New York, and I remember thinking like, how do you pick? Like, there are so many talented players. They're
Yeah.
all here. They all have accomplished different things in college. They all fit different profiles, and you guys had some pretty high picks. So, what kind of drew you to those two in particular when you were making those decisions about the first round draft picks?
Yeah, I think first was who they were as people. I think, both of them have very different personalities, but they're great in their own ways. And I think first we felt like who they were as people fit into what we were trying to do and the type of people that we want on our team. And then watching them, right, the impact that they have on their team, right, how they interact with their teammates, obviously their skill level, right? They have to be able to play. They wouldn't have got drafted if they didn't. But I think seeing the way that they impact their team and understanding the system that they're in, how they're being used, or how they're being asked to play and to contribute, I think all of those things make a big piece when you're looking at, okay, how can we take the pieces that they do, right? I think for a lot of us, we don't assume that they're going to come in as a rookie and do the exact same things that they did in college, right? They're a senior. They were there for, usually 4 years for most people. And so I think when we really looked at them throughout the whole season, we watched them for a couple years prior. So you have a good understanding of their game. You try to get to know them a little bit and talk to people that are around them. And so I think for us going in, I think we got really lucky because we had Aneesah and Saniya as our picks that we wanted, right? We knew the few that would be gone, right? Lottery picks, they're going to be gone before that. So when we thought realistically who we could get, we kind of hit on who we wanted to get. So I think we were really excited about that and knew that both of them, obviously, they're very great, but I think they have a lot of potential. And so that to us was a really kind of green flag that we felt like we need people that, yes, they're really good right now, but they have the capacity and ability to grow and get better. And we can kind of form them into how we need, but they get to be themselves and kind of spread their wings. So I felt like we got really lucky with our draft picks, and we're excited that we got players of that caliber at the seventh and eighth pick.
Yeah, and then Leila Lacan, I think, was one of the key kind of
Yeah.
midseason changes, and I covered the Sun the year prior when she was drafted, and I remember thinking this team is so close to a championship, and then they draft this girl who I didn't know much about because I think a
Yeah.
lot of the members here were so dialed into the American game that you end up
Yeah.
missing some really talented players that fortunately for you guys did your homework. And then 3 games into her Sun tenure, I was like, okay, I get it. I understand
Yep.
why they made that decision, even if she wasn't going to come over right away. What stood out to you about Leila and kind of, I know that was before you were general manager, but in kind of bringing her in here and why was she so pivotal to this midseason turnaround? Because I do feel like when she was on the floor, you guys kind of seemed like a different team at times.
Yeah, so first shout out to Darius Taylor. He was our GM the last couple years, and I was assistant GM. And I think when we watched her, I think just first the intensity that she plays at, it's unmatched, and I think she's so young. And I think we think of a lot of young players in her age range where they just need time. They have to get used to the physicality and the system. But she's been playing over in France and playing as a professional for a long time. And so I think on both sides of the ball, right? Her defense, I think, is what really changed it for us. Like it
Yeah.
was just a different level that we hadn't had. And so I think when you watch a player, first you see like, okay, their size, right? She's long, she's a big guard, she's not little, but her intensity, just like her work ethic, the way she impacts the game on both sides, I think really stood out. And, there's a lot of really, really great players overseas too. So that who they're doing this against aren't, nobodies, right? They're playing at a really high level. She played for really great teams. And then being on the Olympic team for France, right? Like she was playing against some of our best players in the world that have ever played, and she's able to hold her own out there when she's there. So I think when we watched her, we knew, and at the time, right, we had a team that was looking to win a championship. We understood that drafting her, we didn't need her to come right now, right? We knew we could wait a
Yeah.
year for her to get another year as a pro, and understood that even if she came last year, her role would have been a lot different on the team that we had. So I think we knew that 2025 was the year we wanted her to come. And I think I wish she could have came even sooner. I think the beginning of our season would have looked a little bit different if she was out there. But I think she showed, kind of like you mentioned, she showed everyone like, there's a reason we drafted her. And I think she's like just scratching the surface for how good she'll be. So she's one that we're really excited about.
And I remember last year, when I spoke to you last, I asked you like, "What do you know for certain about this upcoming group?" Or like, what can you say about what the roster might look like? And it was hard to come up with really anything that was certain because it was
Yeah.
such a time of change. And I feel like now you guys have a level of like, there's the young core here. Like, what do
Yep.
you feel like is certain about where this team is headed in the future? Like, which players do you think are kind of most pivotal, and what's kind of the vision that you now have, seeing the pieces kind of come together in year one?
Yeah, I think the young core is going to be key for us, and obviously you with youth, you need to have select vets and really good vets around the team. But I think, and it kind of speaks to our identity that we've had, that like really gritty, hard nosed defense first type of mentality, get up and down, push in transition, like that's how we want to play. And those are the type of players that we want. But we want players that are great people, right? That are really bought into what we're trying to do and, how we want to play and how we want to work as a team. And I think what made Connecticut Sun really good in the past is they win by committee, right? Like we're able to create stars and create superstars over time, but they win by committee. It's not usually one person that's carrying the load.
Mhm.
And so for us, I think that's kind of the overall vision. And I think our youth is where we're like, obviously we have to get through expansion draft and things like that, right? So we'll see, the things that are out of our control a little bit. But I think really building around our youth and some of those younger players we have is going to be one of our main focuses as we go forward. Because again, I think for us to be successful, we have to be able to build through the draft and create a little bit of momentum and cadence. I don't think we're a team that can, pick and select different players every year and go out there and give a good product. I think we have to build some momentum from this year into next. And we think we can do that the best, kind of, again, focusing around youth. We know that there's more involved in that, but that'll kind of be our focus going forward.
You mentioned the expansion draft. Obviously, Veronica Burton was selected
Yeah.
last year. She went on to have an incredible year with the Golden State Valkyries. Seeing that, knowing like I'm sure part of you was like, "Oh, damn, I wish we still had her." But then also, I
Yeah.
know you spoke glowingly of her when we last spoke. What's
Yep.
that experience like to know that you want to protect all your players, but then also balancing that with like seeing their success elsewhere? And did the experience of her getting picked change at all your mindset about how you're going to approach the upcoming expansion draft?
I would honestly say first, with not having a lot of detail about what the expansion draft will look like, I don't know 100%.
That's
But
true.
I will
Yeah.
say, I think for Veronica specifically, it's like, yes, when you see how well she did, you're like, dang, she would have helped us a lot.
Yeah.
But I will say, I'm a firm believer in sometimes the fit that you're in can make or
Mhm.
break it. And I think, like I mentioned last year, Veronica's fantastic, right? Like as a person, as a player, can if anyone said anything negative, I would think they're a liar because like she's that good. But I think it was really, to me, it felt good to see her flourish in the way that she did because a lot of players first don't get that opportunity to, but for her to go into a situation that's brand new, right? It wasn't by her choice and she just took another step in her career. So I'll always be happy for players like that because, that can make or break someone's career. And I think she did it in a great way. And I think sometimes I view it as it's a good problem to have, right? Like when you have really good players on your team that you don't want to lose and that you want to be able to keep. And then when they do go somewhere else, you see how good they are and people really get a chance to see it. I think that's a good problem, right? That means that you got the right type of players, right? You pull in those players that are high level professionals in our league. And so but you never want to lose them, right? I think that's the hard
Yeah.
part of all of us as GMs in this space where we have obviously expansion this year. We don't have to worry about it in 27, but then 3 straight years of expansion drafts, right? Like that's going to cause a little bit of an issue where we have to look at how deep can we build out our team and our roster and how much turnover are we going to expect to have. And if you're making trades, is it worth trading where you might lose a person to expansion? So I think it really changes more of how we view building out our teams year to year versus a specific expansion draft. But we'll do our best to protect as many as we can, obviously, and the ones that we see as a part of our future. But you kind of have to go a little give and take. And there's some parts that we can't totally control. But Veronica definitely she killed it. She really did. I saw her sister last week, and I was like, dang, like Veronica did such a good job. And I think it's just great for us that we get to say that we were a part of her journey, even if it was short, that we were able to, help her get to that situation. But yeah, she would have helped us a lot this year.
Yeah. It's amazing because especially watching the playoffs this past year, it's like you see how many players are waived or out of the league and are sitting at home, and then a month later, like Odyssey Sims, like there's so many
Yeah,
examples of that. So
yeah,
Veronica is one of those cases where people might forget in the big picture, but Connecticut Sun called after she was waived. So for
hmm,
sure we'll be a part of that story. And it was fascinating. It'll be fascinating to see how the expansion drafts play out moving forward as
yep,
more and more teams come, because I can only
yeah,
imagine what a tough predicament that is for you to be in. You also mentioned the importance of having vets alongside the young players, which I feel like sometimes can be a little bit overlooked when
hmm,
you just want to have young talent. You're rebuilding and
yeah.
all of that. What roles did Marina Mabrey and Tina Charles play in kind of keeping this group afloat? And I know Marina reportedly had requested a trade before the season, and then she
Hmm,
sticks around and
yep.
seemed to have a good time, at least from my vantage point. But yeah, curious from your standpoint, like what role did those two play in particular?
Yeah, I think, obviously they were our probably most established vets in their success that they've had in the league for sure, especially Tina. And I think, it's hard when you're coming in first to a tough season, right? We lost a lot of games early on, and it's
Yeah.
really hard to kind of keep that motivation and the discipline to keep showing up. But I can say for both of them, they still did, right? They showed up, they gave what they could, they tried to help the young ones, they tried to help the youth and get us into the right direction. And I do give them a lot of credit too with us kind of making that shift after All Star of having a little bit more success. I think we just stayed consistent, right? I think our vets stayed really consistent. And, I give especially Marina a lot of props and credit because she did, right? She asked for a trade. She wanted to go somewhere else. And, I think she could have went either direction. She could have said, you know what, they made me stay here. I'm not gonna help. I'm not gonna be a part of this. And, it could have been a different year for us. But I think giving her a lot of credit where she really bought into it. And there were some times that was tough and it's hard to do so, especially when you're losing and she's a winner, right? She wants to win. She's really competitive. But I think she got to understand the role and impact that she can have on a team and a little bit of a deeper level than maybe what she's had previously. So I give her a ton of credit for seeing it that way, and staying committed to the process, even when she maybe didn't want to. And I think that speaks to her as a person. But, her and Tina, I think in the best ways that they could to help keep our team afloat, keep them going. And I think it was funny to see, especially with Tina, like we had, a lot of youth and to see her where they call her TikTok Tina and she's out there dancing and doing all this stuff. So I think it helped on both sides where, our vets were able to help our team kind of stay consistent. But I think the youth maybe brought something else out of our vets that they hadn't brought out in years past. So I think overall, that's something we want to build off, right? We want to make sure that we double down on that and that we keep around the same vets and bring in the right type of vets to help that young core keep developing, but then also keep our team on the right path.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this football season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. I have still never been to a football game, but I am getting more into football. You can project, you can, make your picks on players like Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, more or less on number of touchdowns, and more or less on certain number of passing yards. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on at least two player stats. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks is the only app that offers stacks, meaning that you can pick the same player up to 5 times in the same lineup. Want to pick more on Josh Allen's pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup only on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. Yeah, do you have any sense if either of those two will be a part of the Sun future, or if you have other, is it something that you view more as like that type of player should come in for a year during a rebuild, maybe not stick out the entire rebuild? Like, how do you kind of view that role?
Yeah, I think it's tough, right? It's tough to say for sure, yeah, especially with so much uncertainty. But I think the part that is consistent is we understand the impact of a good vet, right? I think we can harp on our youth all day, but if you don't have the right type of vets or vets that are really bought in, it can make or break it for you. So I think it's something that we're really looking at, right? Like we're looking at our roster as a whole, but then trying to make sure we're gonna go into what we can as the craziest free agency period that we've probably ever
Yeah.
had, with an open mind, but also open mind doesn't always mean new, right? That could mean staying consistent. So I think it's hard to say which direction we'll be in yet. It's a little early for those conversations, but I think as we go, we're going to keep in mind that whether it's people that were on our team or new people, we want to have the right type of people around our younger players.
And then you traded for Aaliyah Edwards midseason. What went into that decision, and kind of how did you see her shorter stint with you guys?
Yeah, she's someone that, we had our eye on even the year before in the draft. We knew it was very unlikely that she would be around. We had the 10th pick. And so I think, when you're looking at trade opportunities, we weren't looking to move anyone necessarily. I'm always more of an opportunistic person when it comes to trades. And
Mm.
I think as conversations kind of evolved, and kind of seeing where, I felt like our post position, we needed a little bit more, especially in that four spot. I feel like we had to get a little bit more kind of umph in that area.
Mm.
And so I think as conversations went, Aaliyah was someone to me, it was like, hey, if we can get her, we should, right? Like within reason, right? We all have what we're willing to give and all that. But we kind of felt like first as again, I'm always gonna harp on first as a person, kind of who she is, and obviously I was very familiar with her playing at UConn, and things like that. So I think she fit what we like, right, and what we're looking for, and especially in that 4 spot, that's a hard spot, right? Some of the best players in our league are at the
Yeah.
4, and I think you need to try to find someone that can compete, and kind of hold their own. And she's obviously still very young and has room for growth. But I think, she was someone that we felt like, look, if this is a real thing and we can get her, we have to find a way to do so. So we were really excited that we got to get her. Honestly, I wish we could have got her a little bit earlier in the season, but glad that we got her before the deadline.
Yeah, it seems like there was a couple late season additions that I wonder how the year would have played out if you had, like, the full roster,
Yeah.
from the jump,
Yeah.
but
Me
ultimately, it
too.
probably helps you in the draft standings, so, you
Yeah,
probably
for
accomplished what
sure.
you kinda needed to. And then I wanted to ask you about coaching because we see so much turnover still in
Yeah.
WNBA coaching roles. Curious about how you kind of assessed Rashid Mazian's year 1 performance, and how do you see him fitting into the future of the Connecticut Sun long term?
Yeah, I think we knew coming in, right? We knew this year was going to be a challenge, right? And one thing, we're very realistic, right? I think it would have
Yeah.
been totally unrealistic to expect, hey, come in, coach, and get us to the finals in year 1. It just, we knew that wasn't going to happen, right? Unless there was an absolute miracle. So I think we were very realistic to understand that this year was about creating a foundation, right? Of getting things started. And so I would say, obviously, with a rough year, I think he was probably harder on himself than anything because he does want to be successful like all of us. But I think for a first year, he did pretty well in the sense of staying consistent, right? I think he had an idea and a vision when he came in. And I think at times when you're not winning, it's hard to stay consistent to that. It's easy to panic or to pivot, or to just like scrap it and try something new. But I think I give him a lot of credit for staying committed to the process and understanding that even if it's rough right now, we're going to keep finding a way to show up and improve. And I think that was the biggest thing that we wanted to see was progress, right? We wanted to have a different feeling from the beginning to the end. And so I think, I think it's hard for a lot of coaches when you come in and expect to have immediate success. I know that's what we all like to see. But sometimes, depending on your situation, I just don't know if that's as realistic as what we want it to be. So I think overall, he's still going to be our coach, right? We're not changing things up. And I think he's someone that we still believe in and understand, and we trust that he's going to help our team get to where we want it to be. But we're very bought into the process and appreciate that he is too. And that, even now we're in October, it's early off season, and we've been to work, right? Getting ready for the next season, how we can improve, how we can grow. So I'm very excited about, even though we have a long time, but very excited about next season and to see what he does with our team.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then one of the last things I wanted to ask you is obviously the Connecticut Sun have been in the news quite a bit because of a
Yeah.
potential sale. And I live in Boston. I have to say I have a stake in the game here. I love the idea of there being a team in Boston, but I also
Yeah.
understand and really respect and value the perspective of a lot of Connecticut fans who are like,
Hmm.
we're the OGs here. And so
Yeah.
this storyline being in the background while you guys are playing your games and preparing for the season and all of
Hmm.
that, like did that have an impact at all on the players, on you? Like, what do you kind of make of the fact that this was kind of a big ongoing
Yeah.
dialogue while you guys are just kind of going through the season?
Yeah, it posed a little bit of a challenge, I would say, of just, you try to stay as focused as you can on the present and what you're doing, but we all think about the future, right? We all think about what
Yeah.
does this mean for us if it happens, or our job or our family? Do we have to, right? We all, that's just natural to think that. So I think we tried our best to give as much information as we could, which honestly wasn't a ton, right? We still don't really have an answer on what it's going to be, but I think it was hard to navigate when we don't know what the future holds. So I think we just tried our best to stay very, very committed to like, hey, all we can do is focus on right now. We'll pivot if we need to. So I think it caused a little bit, but at the same time, I think what helped is that we started to have a little bit more success on the court. So I think it makes everything feel a little bit better, a little bit lighter, where maybe is a little bit of a less worry. But that's definitely something that we're working on. How do we navigate as we go into expansion and free agency and hopefully having some more information? But it's definitely, it causes some challenges for sure. But at the end of the day, we just have to work with what we can, right? And what's in our control. And so I think for now, we're just really focused on, Connecticut and being here in 2026. We know that's not going to change. And we'll see. We'll see where the cards land.
Yeah. What's your role as general manager in that process? I cover the Celtics as well, and Brad Stevens was kind of in a similar position where it was like you're
Mm,
not the one selling the team, but obviously it directly affects you, and you're in
yeah.
kind of the top leadership role. So, what's your role been in these conversations?
Honestly, not as involved as I think people think, right? Like I can give my opinion, but like I have no say in what happens,
Yeah,
like I'm just kind of here. I get what I can get and I have to work with what I'm given, And so I think really my biggest role has been trying as best as possible to keep mainly our staff, right? Our players, I think they're used to moving around, right? They're used to going different
yeah,
places, but for staff of making sure that they feel as secure as possible, right? And they understand that they're staying up to date, especially with something can be put on social media that's true or not true. So kind of trying to put out the fires and advocating as much as possible when my voice is asked for or needed or input. So I think I'm kind of like the fire extinguisher maybe a little bit as more of my role. And I think one thing I'm very confident is when everything kind of gets settled, once I get the information that I need, that we'll be able to continue moving forward and hopefully it all works out for all of us. But yeah, my role is limited in some ways, but I just try to focus it in on our staff to make sure that they're feeling good.
that was my takeaway from the ownership sale in Boston too, and for the Celtics was for some reason in my head I was like the general manager was really involved in this, and then I realized that's really not the case. Everybody kind of
Yeah.
just assumes that. So I'm sure you're eagerly awaiting kind of what happens here, like everybody else.
Yeah, for
Last
sure.
question for you at this point: what makes you the most excited for being in this role? I'm sure year one, lots of highs, lots of lows, but on a personal level,
Yeah.
on a professional level, like as you look towards year two of being in the seat, what makes you most excited about this organization?
I think what I'm most excited about is seeing some progress, right? I think when you have a tough year and you struggle a little bit, I think you want to see your work pay off, right? You want to see all the time that you're putting in. Same with your staff. You want to start seeing that success on the court. So that's what I'm most excited about. And also for our players, right? Like we have a lot of young players and they're just getting their feet wet. So to kind of see their growth and development. And so that's kind of like our theme is like, how do we grow? How do we develop? How do we improve from last year to this year? And so that's what I'm the most excited to see is, what does that actually look like? What does it feel like, right? To have a little bit more success than what we've had. So that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me motivated. And it makes me really, really excited for 2026.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Morgan. This has been so great. I'm really excited. I feel like this has been one of the fun young teams to watch. And I've seen that from a
Yeah.
lot of people say that they really enjoyed watching this Connecticut
Hmm.
team, even though they weren't necessarily the most winningest
Yeah.
team in the league. So we'll see how what year two fares. Congrats on
Awesome.
year one under your belt. And hopefully we'll have you back on soon when the team has even more success moving forward.
Yeah. Awesome. I appreciate it.